So if that works.
All right, so hi everyone. We're from Bethesda Gaming Studios here in Austin. I thought we'd come and talk a little about who we are, what we do, and answer questions. Any questions you have about game development, recruitment, whatever. So I am tech director for BGS Austin, and I kind of manage the engineers and Fallout 76.
I'm John Balan. I'm a senior gameplay engineer at BGS.
I'm Chris Marshall. I'm a senior quest designer at BGS Austin.
And I am Mason Easton, associate tools programmer at BGS Austin and former DGADS president. So I'm very happy to be back here. Yeah. So I think I would love to start off talking about maybe we got into the industry, different paths and journeys into that. And I think that's very relevant to students who, those of y'all, I was in your shoes, they were all in your shoes as well, but want to get into the industry. So I can start off with myself and talk a bit about that. So like I said, I was president here. I graduated in the spring with my CS degree and applied to Bethesda. And then a couple of weeks later got an offer and started in July. So it was very kind of a whirlwind of excitement and interviews and whatnot, but very lucky to have gone straight from college into a job. And the interview process is still very fresh on my mind, so I'm happy to answer questions about that, like what it's like, scary, not scary kind of things about it. But yeah, so I was here, CS degree, president of EGADS, and a lot of exciting stuff.
Yeah, I had a bit of a similar path, but I knew I wanted to do games pretty early on. I took CS classes in high school, but I did not become an engineer because I hate CS. So I went to college. I got an English degree. I still wanted to do games, but there wasn't any direct path for me into it. So I decided to apply to a grad program for games. So I went to the Guildhall program at Southern Methodist University and became a designer there. Then I worked for 4 years in mobile games in St. Louis at a company called Simutronics that is actually very old, but not well known. And from there, I applied to be a quest designer, kind of just long shot hope, and I wound up getting the job, and I've been here for 4 years.
Yeah. So mine, y'all are so calculated. Mine is so I graduated high school, didn't know what I wanted to do. Went to community college to do kind of the basic stuff to figure out what I wanted to major in. Took a CS class just because I thought it was interesting, and then I was kind of into tech stuff, and figured out that I liked programming, and that I liked games a lot, and so I ended up, instead of going to, I was gonna come to UT, but I chose to go to DigiPen and did their games program, and did a bunch of stuff there. I got really into graphics programming, and I thought rendering programming was I was passionate about and what I wanted to do. And I did like a rendering programmer internship at Epic for a summer, and that kind of made me realize that I didn't actually enjoy it all that much in the real world. It was kind of too far away from games. I wanted to be closer to the actual game and talk to the designers and stuff like that. So when I started searching for a job, I had one foot applying to rendering positions and the other foot kind of applying to gameplay positions. And I ended up interviewing at what would become BGS at Outcry. Brian interviewed me. Yeah. And that was 6 years ago, or about almost 6 years ago. And I've been here since. So.
Yeah, for me, it's pretty traditional computer science degree. I wanted to do games. I was fortunate enough that once after I graduated, a company in Scotland was growing dramatically because they had this crazy deal with BMG. So I started their DMA, primarily working on the GTA games before they became massive, and I've been doing this ever since. I've been for almost 10 years, which is crazy long.
Longer than I've been a designer.
But yeah, confidence to get here, but it's been very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So we mostly just want to hear from y'all. If there's anything, you know, there are things I'm sure we can talk about and chit chat on, but you know, we're any questions all day about various things, so we'd be happy to take anything. Yeah. Almost.
I think you know which one. Do we have to?
So I guess like try to focus try to
You absolutely should. So you're often a lot of job descriptions, the high level formulaic, based from one job to the other. You shouldn't feel like you need to have every single thing on that list because most people don't. So you should aim to get as much as you can. If you're 4 out of 5 or 3 out of 5, go for it. Box on the application.
We do have, I mean, I know several people just at Bethesda who interviewed for one position and they didn't get that position, but they piqued the interest of someone in another department or someone who interviewed them, who then gave them an interview for the position that they have now. So you could think that you want to be like a level designer or a graphics programmer, but in reality, you're really meant to be a tools programmer. And they can tell, sometimes they can tell by how you answer questions in interviews, you know, where your hidden interests might lie.
Yeah, one of our guys applies to be a gameplay engineer, and I immediately said no. And then said, you should talk to this person over here, and you got the job.
To piggyback off what Brian said initially too, when I applied, the position I applied for was a mid-level tools engineer. And I still applied because like Brian said, I checked 3 of the 5 boxes. You know, I maybe didn't have 5+ years of industry experience or a ship triple A game, but like I knew how to program, I knew how to work with a team, had those skills that I knew the rest of it, and I could grow, which I'm constantly doing in this role. But you know, I definitely wouldn't let every bullet point stop you because, you know, clearly they took an interest in me and were willing to meet me at my level instead of expecting me to come in with all this stuff. So I definitely think like just go for it. If you see a position that interests you, apply. The worst they can do is say no or not get back to you. Like you're not losing anything by just shooting off your resume. So I would definitely encourage it.
I think there's probably a 50-50 shot I got my first job because I had the exact same name as someone who already worked there. They probably hired me because they thought it would be funny. They desperately needed a designer. You never know. It's worth a shot.
Yeah. One thing to consider too is that if you're doing stuff like eGads and if you're making games and stuff like that, you don't have 0 experience. You do have some experience. It's not going to be measured in like years of AAA experience, but there's a stark difference of someone that has not done any of that stuff and someone who has. So don't discount that.
Yeah, certainly for me as a hiring manager, I want to see you finish something. That last month, that last 20% is the first 80%. Going through that process of I need to make this not crash my friend's laptop. I need to figure out how to bundle this up and put it on Steam. That is so valuable. Yeah.
In my first interview, we spent probably over half the time just talking about game jam projects I'd worked on and class projects like for people in like game programming paradigms, game tech, anything like that, AT project, so stuff like that. Like we spent, you and Josh and I, a good chunk of time just talking about how did I do certain things and what was my process on architecting stuff and talking through like what was it like start to finish challenges along the way, things like that. So definitely having those bundled projects that you can say, like, I started from concepting, finishing it to giving it to people, putting it on the itch wherever. Super important just to have that stuff, because then you can talk to all the kind of different processes of what you go through.
Especially collaborative projects, especially if you're applying at like a AAA company or a larger company. Well, any company, unless you're going out and doing it yourself alone, you're going to be working with other people, and you need to be able to get along with other people and work with them and know what they need from you and what you can do or what you need from them and that kind of thing. So helps a lot.
I hire engineers who can talk to designers. A large part of what we do every day is not write code. Write code is the smallest thing we do is solving problems for other people, providing tools for designers.
Like most of my job is figuring out what, like Chris will put in a request or a bug, and I'll have to be like, oh, what is your issue? Can I help? And a lot of it is
walk
just
over to
talking.
my desk
Walk
and
over
show
to
me.
the it's Brian, right? A lot of it is just talking to other people in the studio, and you need those skills to. I know people earlier touched on like being able to speak a designer, and a designer needs to be able to understand some programming, terms and whatnot. So that cross collaboration is key. Like y'all been saying, that boils down to that. Take more questions. Bobby?
Always, I guess, this is kind of a question, I guess, towards you, but final. How is tools treated?
It's great. I love it. We get some really cool problems to work on, and unique things that I don't think I get working on the game. It's really fun because I really like kind of what it stands for, helping the other devs. Like I get a lot of satisfaction being like, oh, I reduced Chris's time to complete that part of the quest by like a whole hour. Like that's awesome, being able to enable the developers, the other developers to make their lives easier, their workflows more efficient. I love it. It's treating me really well, and I quite enjoy what I get to do. So
our tools team is very beloved because whenever you have a problem that every day is like, why isn't this checkbox right or something like that? It could be more complex. It could be as simple as that. I put in a request the other day just to get tooltips added to something, because it would have saved me so much time if I had known what a checkbox did and I didn't have to hunt down the answer. So anything like that is really helpful. We appreciate you.
When, to what Chris said, when I joined in my first week, they told me I'd be the second most popular person in the studio behind Josh, the other cool. So it's true. I love that feeling of being like, saving people time and making things more efficient. And I really like that sentiment. So I quite enjoy what I do. I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, our tools have a very wide variety of backgrounds. There's Mason, obviously, but Josh, who mentioned, he is a technical designer. He didn't start as an engineer.
It's all you could add to the team as a force multiplier by working on tools. It's thoroughly an essential part of our company.
Back up to that. What are you looking for?
Right? What were you? Yeah, like we're not doing it for. It's not like. Also, like design flags better, just users of the tools and the engine. Because y'all are in it way more than I am. I'm just poking around the code, so it's a selfless thing. and like the ability to help that's what really draws me to it.
If tools covers a wide variety of roles.
You know, it's not just working in the Asian kit, it's dealing with our offline lighting system, dealing with data management and packaging up
Data.
right.
Under the purview of tools.
I've been doing library.
Yep.
Yeah, we're kind of the sometimes we're the go-to for something broke. Why is it not working? Like, you know, I have an issue, and sometimes we don't know the answer. But we're kind of the like the first people to ask, just because we do touch so many different parts of the pipelines. And back to that.
Sure. Yeah, day in the life. Okay. I guess it depends on which day, but I'll give you a breakdown of the process. So, you know, typically we'll get a request in from leadership that's like, you know, we want to do a quest chain to accompany this patch or something like that, right? And so on our quest design team, everything is very collaborative. So we'll have a series of brainstorm meetings where the quest design team sits around. We decide what do we want the story to be. Very important for us are who the characters are. We believe in character-driven stories, and so knowing the characters and their motivations and who they are and what their job is and all of that is important. We'll come up with that whole outline. We'll break down, say, we usually have an idea based on the size of whatever content drop we're doing, how many quests we need to do. I am coming at this from the perspective of Fallout 76, which is a live service game. So we're constantly putting out an update and then a few more months an update. So the process would be a bit different for like, you know, a full on single player game where you're doing every quest in the game at once or whatever. But in my experience, yeah, so we'll have an idea. We want to do 5 quests. We have 4 people. Someone might have to pick up a quest or whatever. But we usually, as a group, we plan out the story we want to do. We'll have to pitch that to leadership and get their okay on everything. And once we have our plan, then we'll bring that plan to the rest of the team who's coming onto the patch, and we'll present, this is what we want to do. And we'll have to make a list of everything we'll need to get these quests done. A lot of that is requesting art resources. So, you know, if you want to make the quest about a magic sword, you need the magic sword, you need it to look cool. So you don't want to just reuse some dinky sword. We'll have to put requests into the systems design team to help us define, for one thing, the rewards that players will get during the quests. That's one thing that the systems design team takes care of. We'll need to have help on balancing the encounters. We need to work very closely with the level design team. So if you're doing your one quest and we need a new location, then we need to work with the level designers and the environment artists to build out that location. We need to give them exactly how we want things to flow, and then we'll go back and forth on, okay, like this works and this doesn't, and we'll have to adjust here and there. You know, once we have the plan in place, we have all our requests in place, our requests have been approved or denied, and we have to adjust. We'll sit down and do a lot of the writing for the quest. And so we try to do the writing early because the writing has to get voiced over. And in order for everything to align, you have to do the VO well before the quest comes out. And so we'll be trying to get all of the technical aspects and the writing all in and stood up early so that we can play test internally and make whatever adjustments we need to make, because we will, and it happens all the time. Someone will have a really great idea that should be in the quest, but we're past the VO lock. And so we already have actors recording the dialogue and we can't. So if we want to put it in, we'll have to get creative with how we do it. We can't necessarily add more dialogue or something. So the quest design team, forgive me if I go on too long. the quest design team is kind of unique in that at Bethesda anyway, it works differently at different studios. There may be a mission designer whose job is just to lay out like the flow, and then a combat designer who, but as a quest designer, we do the writing, we create the characters in the story, we implement it all in Creation Kit using those tools. So we need to also know our proprietary scripting system, which is called Papyrus. So we need to make all of the connections. We pretty much lay out the entire thing, and then all of the extraneous bits or collaborative bits get added on to our skeleton. So we'll create, the beats of the quest. We'll have all the objectives show up or can go away when they're completed or whatever. And we do all of that pretty much through our tools, and then we iterate until it's good, or as good as we can get it before it needs to ship. Anyone else have? Yes, not really.
Yeah, quest designers are unique at Bethesda because we don't have the ideas person. The quest designer is writing the content, creating the characters, creating the moments in game, which gives them actually experience.
Yeah.
And something different too that Chris touched on is we don't have scripters either, like specific people to script the quest. That also falls on quest designers.
Yeah, I've been talking a lot to other people at other companies that have like a separation between the writing team and the scripting team. And at Bethesda, we are pretty strange. I'm sure there are other companies that do it, but probably not many. In that, well, quest designer kind of, they have their quest and they get to do like all of it, which is great for me. Probably annoying for some people, but
A lot of freedom of iteration on that. But
yeah.
Well, on quest content with the phases.
Yeah, the pass. So at Bethesda, we have a pass system, and we were actually talking about this before we got in here. But one of the things that I thought was really fascinating is a long time ago I watched a GDC talk about this, but everything is done in passes, and we have 4 or 5 passes, kind of depending. The process fluctuates, but we have a pass 0, and that's just the paper design. So that's all of our documentation, all of our requests, all of that gets put in, it gets reread, it gets iterated on, it gets approved. And then we'll move on to pass 1. Pass 1 is getting the first playable, the skeleton up and running. You can make it through the quest. You may have to cheat, but you can do it. Pass 2 is really like kind of everything is in. We have our first dialogue drafts are in so that people can hear them. We have the quest should pretty much be working for the most part, but extraneous things like the terminal entries you might find in the Fallout game, or like lore notes, that kind of thing. If it's written, it doesn't necessarily have to be in. We want the golden path to be basically done. Pass 3 is pretty much everything is as done as it's going to be. We usually have hit VO lock by this point, so the dialogue isn't going to change. And then pass 4 is polish. So anything extra we can do to make it feel better, fixing all the bugs. You're kind of fixing bugs always, but pass 4 is really where like it needs to be done and ready to ship. And then for some types of quests, we would do a pass 5, which was like a multiplayer pass. So for one, our game is obviously it's multiplayer, and that has complications that I'm sure we could get into if we wanted to. Many complications that aren't present in a single player game. And so for a while we were doing a pass just to make sure that all of that worked correctly. But we've kind of worked everything into 4 passes now at this point, because really you should be doing multiplayer from pass 0, right? You should know. So
They don't happen sequentially. So a designer will do pass 0 on one quest, and then do pass 0 on another quest.
Integrated evaluated for the next class.
Right.
But in time to like continue to improve the next class.
Yeah, it allows us also to juggle multiple quests at a time. So if I'm doing 2 or 3 quests, I'll do pass 1 on one quest, and then I'll move on to pass 1 on another quest while we're doing play testing, we're getting feedback on the first one. And I'll come back and do pass 2 and kind of go back and forth. So you're not just always doing the same thing, and you get a chance to iterate, which is very important.
Ryan. Yeah.
Our games are very, very complicated, like more so than it probably appears as a player. And so that there's lots of like simulation-y elements to all of our games that you may not recognize them being there, but without them, it would not feel the same. So it's as simple as like we put clutter in every environment, right? Like you can pick up and interact with almost every object in an Elder Scrolls game or a Fallout game. Most other games don't do stuff like that. That's very time consuming, takes a lot of time. So that's like one element of it.
Yeah, we have a lot of breadth to our system, content into the world. We also make let's build thousands of planets for stuff we do, you know. Each of them takes time. Each of them takes, and it's not just development time, it's QA time, it's iteration time. And yeah, our games are big. I you know, when I started working on Fallout 76 and seeing
How much was a quest? Like a quest to me,
it was the story content of, you know, go into this dungeon, talk to this character. No, the radio system of the quest. Character, when an NPC barks, if you shoot them, that's a quest controlling that. So there's all of these complicated systems that all have to interact. You know, John working on one system has to figure out that system working with the planet generation, or the shipbuilding system, or the system. You know, there's a lot of complications there.
One knock-on effect of having all of these very broad systems is they all interact with each other, and so any problem that comes up in one can easily affect 3 or 4 others, and you got to stamp out all of the fires that arise from that.
I think that's one of the marks of a good developer at BGS is being very aware of the project at large and knowing at a high level how things interact and how changing this thing could affect the rest of the game. Because if you know that, you save so much time. If you know you're like, hey, this could cause problems here. This is going to change how this other system works, so we may need to address that. Versus just changing something and then QA finding something and then going back and forth down the line.
Saving other people's time too.
Yeah.
You can easily break someone else's work without realizing it.
It was like, how can we move faster?
It's like a process improvement.
Yeah.
Process improvements.
Yeah. I mean, we're constantly making process improvements. Yeah. It's a lot of game.
That was a question we asked ourselves repeatedly, especially at the start of the next project or ahead of the start. So, what can we do better? And, we do that on the engineering. We look to see what can we do faster, what can we make better, not just for this game, but for the next game as well. Because code has a spectacularly long lifetime, and
do any of y'all have a story of a day recently where you felt triumphant?
I have to search my mind for this feeling of triumph and success.
There was something. I was working on a data validation system for the game that you could run our data through, and it would tell you like, oh hey, you're missing this part or this piece is wrong. And I had been working on that for a few months and coordinating with QA on like what would save them time and things like that. I pushed on through, and one of the lead QA people said that it saved them dozens and dozens of hours manually going through the game and looking for it. So I thought that was really cool. Kind of like I was talking earlier that way. You know,
That was a big.
hop that.
I've got, yeah, I don't know if I have, I don't know if I have like a collective triumph recently. But I do have, there was a quest I was working on, and I spent a bunch of time coming up with my outline of how it should work and figuring out all the pieces and like how it all should flow together. And I just had this idea that it wasn't right. And so I took it to my team and I just put it up. I didn't lead them in any way. And I said, you know, here's what I've got. What do you think? And they came back and said, these things don't feel right. And here are some possible solutions. Here's what doesn't feel right about it. And it really jived with what I thought. And so that gave me the confidence then to move forward with changes. Whereas if you're constantly rewriting something, you're not sure if something's going to be correct, right? If you get that reinforcement from other people who you also trust, then that's very helpful. And so I was able to make those changes and come back, and I'm much happier with it now.
So I have an example.
It's not an announced feature for Fallout 76, but this is a feature that we had a paragraph design for. And I gave it to a couple of engineers and said, amongst the leadership, and you could feel the excitement on the call. You could feel the lead design mark, just the sort of creative juice and the glee from just playing this feature. And so we're pushing that forward. And real success. Engineer and feature, which I'm an engineer, I want to see more of it.
What are the common red flags that you find in resume proposals for programming positions?
Question. Perhaps what I want to see working on something, like we said earlier, projects. Have those, if you can have those projects available on the internet. I'll go check it. Look at jobs and videos. I don't buzzwords in 20 different languages. And if you say C++, I'm gonna ask you C++.
And like honestly, like if you want to be a gameplay engineer or a server engineer or anyone that does primarily work in C++, you kind of need to have a really good base understanding of that language. That's almost like a hard requirement.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll find out in full screen. We don't want to waste your time. We don't want to waste our time.
How would you gauge whether you are ready to get on and saying that
Okay. Can you explain what the difference is between a pointer and a reference? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, we don't do that.
That's the first question Brian asked me.
Yeah.
They were saying a surprising number of people not as proficient as they may appear.
A lot of people have a surface level understanding of some of the lower level concepts of C++, and you quickly realize they don't really have a deep understanding of it. And so like really dig down into like the nitty gritty of like the base concepts of that language. And if you do that, everything else kind of comes naturally after it.
Yeah, again, it's not that you need to be the world's best C++ expert, because I am totally not the world's best C++ expert. But it's having the ability to understand the concepts and be able to explain them to other people. I think that's often a gap, especially with associates / juniors, is being able to write code. But writing code is a part of our job, like frankly. Knowing you're writing the correct codes for the problem you're trying to solve. You know, the doctors I often see, a good example coming from C# to C++. Our hash tables are very different to a dictionary. Knowing how a hash table works under the surface, great, big thumbs up. Knowing the difference between the stack and the heap, and why you would put something on the heap, that those are useful. Being able to explain what const means and how to get around it. But, yeah. Those are useful skills. Coming from C# to C++, all your data structure knowledge, all your algorithm knowledge, that all transfers over. But learning how to manage memory and how to recognize your uniqueness, how to use a smart pointer via unique pointer via raw pointer, why you shouldn't use a raw pointer, that's all good stuff.
That's why I took C++ off my resume.
Yeah, to mention a bit of what Brian was saying too, that my personal coding skills have gotten so much higher since joining BGS. Like I look back at some college code and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would like rewrite this entire thing. So it's, for me, I was able to on the fundamentals of like data structures, algorithms, like when to do certain things or maybe not to do certain things. And then like now I'm learning what are the high standards of actually incorporating that. And I would say, you know, for any interested CS people who want to learn C++, take Dr. Downing's object-oriented programming class. That taught me everything I drew on the interview. So I would say if you're looking to learn C++, take that class. It will teach you a lot of the fundamentals and the building blocks of what Brian was just talking about, for some good, like solid knowledge about it.
To move a little bit more into just like general software engineering too, one of the key things that I see a lot of juniors not be super they don't have on their mind as much is that readability and like maintainability is king. That's like probably the most important aspect of the code you write. And unless it needs to be extremely performant code for some reason. But you know, code was a long time, like you said, and lots of different engineers are going to be reading and using your code. So having it be well documented and easy to understand is paramount.
That even goes for my job too, because we do scripting and it's basically code. I mean, it's a lower level of code, but it's the same thing. If you get into a Quest script and it's just like a jumbled mess and there's no comments and there's not even a description of what it's supposed to do, you have to then spend your time figuring out what was this person thinking when they wrote this and how is this supposed to work and how does it work and where is it breaking down?
You find out it was yourself.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
Well, I do that all. This is awful, and I know it's awful because I wrote it. It's worth noting that we treat the custom scripts like it's code.
Yeah.
We put them through code reviews like engineers of them. So engineers critique these the script language.
Just raise the bar. If we can get better, and we can trust the script to be performant.
Yeah, and it can be intimidating.
Yeah.
Having a full-on engineer critiquing your script, but it really makes things a lot better.
John said, about the maintainability. Often
On solutions is not usually means risks. We want straightforward, measurable. I can look at this at 6 p.m. on a Friday when the entire server is on fire. I can look at this code and understand what it means, what the intent was behind it. And we get that through structure, through variable names, through function names, and just
Cool one line, like, oh, this is sick. Don't go through that. I don't think I've written a single thing like that.
Write vertical code, not horizontal code.
Yeah. Yeah, and documentation doesn't mean writing commentary about it. We have a technical design document telling the tech pitch of this feature. We'll have code reviews and a code collaborative tool and write commentary on the codes, and other engineers write commentary on the codes, and you have that history there. And then just the variable names, the structure, that all helps to make it readable. Not just a page with comments.
Yeah, I mean, if you're writing comments in code, you should think, why am I having to write a comment here?
Yeah.
And can I structure this to where it doesn't need a comment?
So yeah, like at Bethesda, we do not have a differentiation between like a mission designer and a narrative designer. At other companies, and I can't speak too much to what other companies do because I've never worked for them. I've never been through that process there. But other companies will have a writing team that will bring the story to the other designers and they'll squish it together. And at Bethesda, a quest designer owns the writing just like we own the implementation. And so that gives us much greater control over how we change the story around and how we implement the story because we're able to actually implement it ourselves. As for the QA process, the quest design team in particular, because we are all writers, we put everything we write past the whole group. It all gets vetted and read by all of us, and we give feedback on it openly. If something's bad, we're expected to say that it's bad. If something could be problematic, like in some other way, then we need to raise that as an issue. And also, all of our dialogue, like QA is not explicitly vetting our dialogue, but they are playing the quest, right? And so if they have comments or if other playtesters have comments on what's written, that comes back to us as well as a bug or a note or something like that. And it's up to us whether we want to change it or make it the same. But everything, all of the writing, especially on the QD team at Bethesda, is everything goes past everyone and everyone double checks everyone just to make sure that we're getting the best quality bar that we can. Sometimes things have to sneak in at the last minute because, like we talked about, like you forgot to account for some small thing and you got to throw a line in there. But for the most part, we come to each other with all of the writing as a whole, and then we all get to see and play it as it goes through those phases I talked about, and improve it and make sure that every new iteration is addressing the things that are really a problem and that kind of thing. So.
Also, we know our team quite heavily. Yeah. They know our team better than we do. in our systems and our content better than we do. So they're usually the first people to raise up red flags about something.
Doesn't quite fit with this story over here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll even get lore notes about things that I didn't necessarily know about just because they happen to play some side quest in a Fallout game that I missed or something like that, and then they'll be like, "Oh, that's a really good point. We should probably address that so that we're not retconning ourselves by accident." At Bethesda in particular, because, like I've said, we also get to implement what we write, and the quest is like our vision. I have a great amount of freedom, and so I'm very happy with the amount of freedom that I have. I'm not sure how I would feel at another company where my combat scenario is going to have to bend to the will of like what a writer wants to do or something like that. But in my case, it's kind of all on me. So I have pretty large amount of freedom to do what I need. Now there are constraints and there are problems, like if you want to do something and it's very complicated and you can't quite get it right, well, you may have to change it, something like that. But usually it's some kind of technical restraint or something I overlooked in my own design that is what is limiting me more than like freedom to tell the stories that I want to tell. Again, like you said, it is like if we come up with some crazy off the wall thing and we take it up to Todd Howard and Todd's like, we're not doing that, then of course I have to bow to his will. But for the most part, there's very little interference in what we want to do from higher ups. It's more about how do people feel about it, and if it's getting like a negative reception, then we might consider if that's the right direction. But for the most part, we have a lot of freedom. Oh, for Guildhall, I was cohort 19. Or are you also a Guildhall 30? Oh wow, so many. So many of us. We have other people from. Oh yeah, class, and it's is it semester or trimester? There's like 2 cohorts per year, right? That's only 1 per year. Okay. Um, yeah, they're numbered, so you can tell like, well, like we have other people at Bethesda too, like our lead level designer for 76 was cohort 2 or 3. And so yeah, you'll run into people if you're a Guildhall guy. You every once in a while you run into people who are like, oh yeah, I was cohort 27 or cohort 3. Or and our previous lead quest designer was like the first graduate in class, I think too. So they're out there. That's cool.
Yeah, anybody else?
Okay.
Cool.
Oh, cool.
Last call. I got one more. At what point did you decide you wanted to like? I mean, you talked about how you did some rendering at Epic, and that's where you decided you wanted to do like something else instead. What point did you realize that?
When I realized that I realistically wasn't going to be interacting with like designers or artists in the way that I wanted to. And so that was kind of like, oh, I want to work on in a position that's closer to the actual game and not so far on the engine side.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that most people know is Radiation Rumble public event. I did that. I worked on the encrypted event as well. Actually, Josh McCreary helped me on that when he was a designer still. For the Brotherhood of Steel content, I did Mother of Invention, which is the second quest, and I also worked on the Catalyst, and there was another one, but I'm blanking on it. I mean, at this point, I've worked on the game since it came out. I started about a month after it came out. So I wrote all of the Pioneer Scout quiz questions. Maybe not all of them. I wrote like 75% of them. That was one of the first things I was assigned to do. I did the archery test for the Pioneer Scouts. That was a really tiny. Yeah, I've done quite a few at this point. But
Yeah, feel free to hang out, and again, just thanks for coming out and doing this panel for us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.